Okay, let's move this out of the way. Okay, guys, it's great to see some familiar faces. Some of you who've attended these Zoom webinars in the past, some of you for the very first time. Let me talk you through what the objective of tonight is. Tonight is about talking really about this next cycle that's about to start. So if you're currently a part of the Live and Perform program, then this is going to be really interesting for you because it's basically going to outline what the next 12 weeks holds in store for us. But I also just want to talk about things outside of the program as well, kind of where we're at right now within the season. What are our goals for the Live and Perform program? And what are some other things that we can be thinking about, perhaps with your training or maybe even life outside of the gym, that's going to be maximizing results and setting us up for success come the end of the year. So we have a bit of a rundown of what we have coming up today. I'm going to start by just outlining what we have designed for our season roadmap. So basically, when the season started, which is when the last CrossFit Open finished, all the way up until the next CrossFit Open, what does that whole year look like? We're going to talk about an accumulation cycle and the concept of peaking. I use those words a lot, and I think it's really important we understand what I'm referring to when I say that. We're going to talk about what should we prioritize at this point in the season, movements that we should be preparing for, how to work on your weaknesses if you're a part of the process or you're following another group program. Like, how do we individualize that to make sure that we're still working on things that we need to? We'll talk about, of course, the next cycle. I won't dive into too much detail on the new cycle because those who are a part of the process programming, you're going to get a very lengthy update from me next Monday, which is basically going to break down all the different programs and what we're going to be doing on every single day. So I don't want to repeat myself twice. And I don't want to bore you guys. So I'll just kind of brush over the main themes of the new cycle. We'll talk about making adjustments to the program, which I think is a concept that's really, really important to understand. And it kind of lends itself to this idea of self-regulation, which we talk about all the time. So I just want to kind of go over some key concepts there. And then we're just going to finish by talking about self-awareness in the environment. Oh, hello, Josie. Is Josie joining the Live or Perform program this cycle, Krishka? No answer. Great. Okay, let's move on. Okay. The first thing, before we start talking about the season, it's really important to remember that this call is for those who are preparing to peak for the CrossFit Open. And we know that the CrossFit Open has two divisions. It has the scaled division and it has the open division. They also have master division. They also have a foundation division. But for most of us on this call, knowing the majority of you here, that's what we're peaking for. So this call is really specifically talking about those who follow the Live program, and the goal of the Live program is to peak, to try to scale all of the CrossFit open workouts and maybe even RX a few. And the goal of the Perform program is to prepare our athletes to be able to RX all of the CrossFit open workouts. Those are the goals. Okay, so let's talk about the season roadmap. So here is where we are. So on Monday next week, we are going to be starting this new cycle. But let's quickly start by just reviewing what we've already completed this year. So when the CrossFit Open finished back here, we did what we call a 12-week accumulation phase. After we finished that 12 weeks, we went into a 6-week intensification phase. Once we finished that 6-week intensification phase, we are just about to finish a 3-week competition phase. Now, why we call it a 3-week competition phase is because, of course, we have been doing the summer throwdown. And I know not everyone in this call has been doing the summer throwdown, but really we kind of like put this competition deliberately into the middle of our year to help prepare our online subscribers and our affiliates for getting the gist of what an online competition like the CrossFit Open actually feels like. Something that I have actually learned this year as, the programmer behind the process is last 3 years and the pandemic being around has meant that there really hasn't been many competitions. So the summer throwdown and other online competitions kind of been our only source of kind of like fulfilling our competitive desires over the last 3 years. But now with the world opening up again, we're seeing loads and loads and loads of competitions, on the calendar now, especially here in Asia. So that's really cool. And I guess it kind of like begs the question as to, next year, is it necessary for us to be running a 3-week competition in the middle of the year? Maybe no. That's going to be something that we're going to be reviewing as a team. But anyhow, we are on the very last week of this 3-week competition phase. So this Saturday, we have the final workout, the summer throwdown. And then we are going to start a new cycle, and it's going to be a 12-week accumulation cycle. Let's fast forward to what happens after this accumulation cycle. So once we finish that, we move on, and in around November time, late November, we're going to start a 7-week intensification cycle. And if you have no idea what accumulation and intensification mean, don't you worry at all, because I'm going to be going through that in just a little bit. So we've got a 7-week intensification cycle. That's going to take us through to the new year. Now, when January rolls around, this for us is kind of like the most important time of the year, because this is where we start peaking for the CrossFit Open. Knowing that the CrossFit Open is going to be kind of around about the end of February, January time is when we want to be in a place where we're feeling healthy, we're feeling hungry, and we're ready to kind of crank up the intensity of our training a little bit, right? I think it's a really important thing to remember, because January is actually, we've got some time before then. We've still got a few more months before the year ends. So if you are in a position where you're starting to panic a little bit, you're starting to stress, starting to think, maybe I'm not fit enough, not strong enough, haven't learned all my skills, don't worry, because we've got plenty of time. And really, we want to get to January time and have another gear to give with our training. Okay, so if you're crushing yourself every day at the moment and you just got no more to give, the likelihood is you're probably going to end up in January time and be a little bit burnt out, a little bit injured. And that's something we see a lot in people who are, peaking for the CrossFit Open. So make sure that's not you. And we'll talk about how we can do that a little bit later. And then, of course, February 19th, we're going to be competing in the CrossFit Open. And who knows, someone on this call might actually crush the Open and qualify to quarterfinals, in which case, we're going to be covering that tomorrow on our call, talking about the Compete the Elite program. Okay, so let's talk about some of these terms that I've been using a lot. And every time we do these webinars, or if you follow the process and you read my very, very lengthy updates about what our new cycles are about, you're going to see that some of these terms thrown around a lot. Firstly, let's talk about what we mean by peaking. Peaking means that we are preparing an individual or a team to be at their physical and mental best at a specific point in the year. So the specific point in the year for pretty much all of us on this call is going to be the CrossFit Open. So what that means is that plan that I just showed you guys, which basically outlined the whole year, the whole idea of that framework and that map is to ensure that when February rolls around, we are at our best. Now, obviously, half of the challenge there is on us as coaches and how we deliver the program and how we design the program. But the other half is down to you guys in understanding what the program is trying to achieve and making sure that you're buying into that process so that, what you're putting into program is matching what it's trying to get out of you. Okay, so really what we have to take away from this is that we do not expect you guys to be at your fittest right now. So if right now you're training and you're thinking, I don't feel that aerobically fit right now, or my Olympic lifts feel a bit rusty, or I felt like my gymnastics has been better, that is totally okay. Because the way that we're doing this and the way that we're trying to get you to be at your best in February is by creating these small little training cycles that we've been doing. And within each of these training cycles, we're picking a few things to focus on, right? So you'll often see when we start a cycle, we're going to be working on these 3 to 4 to 5 things. And we're going to put a little bit more energy into these 3 to 4 to 5 things. And everything else is kind of going to go into maintenance mode. And what happens over the years when we do this, these small little intense focuses where we're picking a few things to try to get good at, we get really good at certain things and other things just kind of get a little bit good. But over the year, what we want is all these things start improving and improving, 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 so that by the time the Open comes around, we've actually addressed everything at some point in the year, and we're at a high level. Now, the other way to approach training, which a lot of CrossFit programs do, and this is what CrossFit.com does, is they don't have something like a peaking structure. And what they're trying to do all the time is they're just trying to get better at everything all the time. So, every week has every movement, every time domain, everything that you might see in something like the CrossFit Open. And that can be a really, really good way to plan training. But the only problem with that is that when you're trying to do everything at once, our progress can be really, really, really slow. So no one thing ever gets really good, and we kind of like crawl along at snail's pace. Another issue with that is that it means that the intensity and the volume is always the same all year round. And if you're crushing yourself all year round, sometimes that doesn't lead to success. I think a year should be split into periods of time where it's a little bit easier and in periods of time where it's a little bit more intense. And basically we kind of just flip-flop over a year by going through intense periods and less intense periods. And then when the new year rolls around, we just do that again. So let's talk about some of these terms that you're going to see. And this is maybe getting a little bit geeky on the programming side, but this is kind of how we operate when it comes to writing your training programs. So basically in a year, there are 5 distinct phases of training. There is an accumulation phase, or there can be multiple accumulation phases, intensification, competition prep, competition phases, and then things like deloads and tapers. So let's talk about definition of each one. When we talk about accumulation work, what we generally mean by that is that the training looks a little bit less like the sport. Okay, so if the sport, in this case, the CrossFit Open, is going to be 3 weeks, it's going to be workouts between 8 to 20 minutes long. We have a rough idea of what movements we're going to see. Basically, an accumulation phase might mean that we're doing things a little bit different to that. So what I mean by that is that we're not just going to be doing Metcons that look like the CrossFit Open right now. Okay, so instead, we have an opportunity at this time of the year to be doing things like isolating some of our movements. So rather than doing, toes to bar with double unders and box jumps in a continuous piece, we can isolate our double unders. We can isolate our box jumps. We can isolate our toes to bar, work on technique, work on efficiency. We can maybe bias strength. We can bias technique. We can pick like a certain time domain, like a 1K row, and go all in on that. So generally, when we talk about accumulation phases, first concept to understand is the training looks a little bit less like the sport. Second thing to understand is that training is probably a little bit less intense. And when I say less intense, I'm talking about like metabolically intense. When I say metabolically intense, I don't know why my computer keeps doing that. Sorry, guys. When I talk about metabolically intense, we do a really, really hard Metcon, like a Fran or a Grace or something where we're just going all out, balls to the wall. That's what I refer to.
Talking about this next training block.
Thanks, RJ. Love that you're sharing what we're doing with your family. But when we talk about, accumulation phases, we're going to be doing potentially less of that. So the training might be a little bit less intense. But when we talk about intensification, that is kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum. So if accumulation is a little bit less intense, we isolate things a little bit more, we focus on technique. Intensification is where our training looks a lot more like the sport. So in intensification phases, we're going to be doing a lot more Metcons. Maybe our strength is going to go into maintenance mode. Maybe we're going to do some fatigue-based strength work. So doing like max lifts after a Metcon as an example. That's what our intensification phase is going to look like. Now, competition prep phases. Competition prep refers to the weeks or the months leading into a competition. So for us, the competition prep phase is really going to start around January time. That's when we're going to start our competition prep. When it says a competition phase, that is referring to when we're actually competing. So the CrossFit Open, guys, is how long? Hold up your fingers so I know you know. It is 3 weeks, 3 weeks long. So that means we're going to have a 3-week competition phase there. And then we got some deloads. Like in a whole year, we've always got some deloads factored in there. And that's just a chance for us to rest, recuperate, and recover. So when we look at the whole year, the 12 months that I showed you guys on a roadmap, this is how we're breaking the year. 40% of the time is spent doing accumulation work. So a little bit less intense, a great chance for us to focus on isolating things, technique, etc. 30% of the year is spent intensification. We know we can't spend too much time in intensification and competition phases because it's really hard on the body. And if we're doing intensification and competitions all the time, we're just going to beat our bodies up. We're going to deal with things like burnout, injuries, and illnesses. And we want to try to stay away from all that stuff as much as possible. And then, competitions and deloads are about 10% of the year. Okay. Next question or page. I don't know. My computer's going crazy. Let's talk about what we need to be focusing on right now. So at this point in the year, what should we be prioritizing? Now, this is a cool little graphic that, thank you very much, Isabel, who kind of made this last minute for me. We looked at basically summarizing all the movements that have come up in all the CrossFit Opens to date. So this is basically every Open, first one being in 2011, what movements have showed up each year. And maybe it's no surprise, or maybe it is a surprise, the 2 movements that have showed up in every single CrossFit Open so far is a thruster and a double under. The next most common movement to show up in the CrossFit Open is the toes-to bar. And then the next most common movement to show up in the Open is a chest to bar, followed by a wall ball, and then, so on and so forth. Now, I think why this is a really important, table to share with you guys is that if our goal is to qualify for the CrossFit Open, there is a big skill component to a lot of these movements. And if your goal is to be at your best come February time, one of the things I would really emphasize that you should be focusing and working on right now is just getting the skills down. So when we talk about the skills of the movements we're going to see in CrossFit, some of these movements have much more of a skill element to them. Some of them have more of like a mobility element to them. And some of them have more of like a strength element to them. So if we kind of just look at just that first column and just break that down, something like a thruster, for most of us, we're going to have the ability to squat below parallel and put our arms overhead. So thrusters for me is not a big skill-based movement. Most people can kind of walk into gym on day one and do a thruster. Go to the next movement though, a double under. Double under is, one of the skills, the many skills in CrossFit that elude a lot of people. And this one movement that comes up in the Open every single year, and it just catches people by surprise. And they all say, oh, should have worked on my double unders this year. Like that caught me by surprise. When actually, when you look at the stats, it shouldn't really be a surprise because it's been there every single year. And the great thing about double unders, guys, is you can work on them all the time. They're not that taxing. They're not that demanding. And all it takes is just some consistency and putting in some small reps every day or every week, and you're going to see progress there. Next movement, toes to bar. Now, toes to bar for a lot of people are going to think it's a skill-based movement, but actually for a lot of people, it's actually a strength-based movement. A lot of people who struggle to link toes to bar or even perform one toes to bar are generally going to be lacking strength. Number one, their pulling strength, so the ability to use their lats to push down on a pull-up bar, and probably number two, their trunk or hip flexors. But I'm going to say that the first, lat strength, is going to be a much, much bigger limiter for those people. So if strength is a limiter and that's what's holding you back from things like toes to bar, chest to bar, well, we've got to work on our strict pulling strength. And thankfully, we have that a lot tied into our program. And you also have things like the gymnastics program. I'll cover just one last movement because the chest to bar, I think that's a bit of a special movement in a sense that there are a lot of athletes who are strong enough to perform chest to bar pull-ups, but they haven't refined and worked on the technique of it. And therefore, when high repetition chest to bar pull-ups come up, they just burn out and they really struggle to complete the workout. So that might be a strength limiter for you, but it might also be a technique limiter for you. Really, the takeaway message here, guys, is to take a screenshot of this or snap this, have a look at all those movements, and you really just want to go through and just check off the movements to make sure that you can do them. All right, we obviously want to make sure that we're prioritizing the movements that are most likely to show up based upon the statistics and the data of what showed up in the past, and probably want to spend a little bit less time doing the movements that haven't really showed up. So if you're going to ask me, what movement should I be prioritizing? Should I be doing a bar muscle up? Or should I be doing pistols? I'm probably going to say it's going to be more worth your time working on doing more bar muscle ups, and pistols should kind of feature, very little in your program. Because if your goal, again, is to peak for the Open, then let's use these statistics. Okay, now, if you were to kind of ask me, well, what do I think we're going to see in the Open this year? These are kind of some of my hunches. Now, these are a lot of the kind of basic movements. So I'm not going to say things like thrusters, double unders, because I think those things could potentially be there every single year. But if we're talking about the scaled Open, I think things that we should be exposing ourselves to and making sure that we are proficient with are things like shuttle running. Now, I know everyone can shuttle run, but I mean like getting really good at the turns and getting really efficient in how you transition and pivot when you hit that 25 foot. Practice your shuttle runs. Handstands, so I think wall walking will be in there. We might even see some, increase in complexity there, maybe even handstand push-ups in the scaled Open. Kipping gymnastics, we've seen kipping pull-ups programmed in multiple years of the scaled Open now as well. That's why for our live program, for any athlete who's able to perform at least 2 pronated pull-ups strict, we are now, exposing them to kipping pull-ups, because of this exactly. I think we're going to see kettlebells this year. It was, listed as a requirement of equipment last year, but we didn't see them programmed. I think this year we probably will. And I think skipping movements, and I don't just mean double unders. I think double unders, of course, statistics tell us they'll probably show up, but other things like crossovers, alternating speed steps, backward skipping, double under crossovers. This is an area that I know Bosman, the head programmer, is really keen on challenging what he calls virtuosity. So basically, like, once you've unlocked a skill, don't get comfortable, just learn that skill, evolve the other skills that you can do with that movement. For those who are trying to peak for the open, shuttle running, yes, handstands, but I don't think it's just going to be handstand push-ups anymore. I think we might see handstand walking, freestand, handstand holds, pirouettes, freestand handstand push-ups. I think those things could well show up in the CrossFit Open. I think we're going to see kettlebells. I think wall-facing handstand push-ups that we saw in the quarterfinals and in the semifinals and in the games is going to show up again this year in the Open. So make sure we're practicing our chest to walls. Ring and bar gymnastic complexes. So rather than just doing chest to bars or just doing toes to bars, I think you're going to start to see things like one toes to bar into a pull up, into a bar muscle up, where athletes have to, fluidly move between different movements. And of course, skipping movements for you guys as well. Crossover, speed steps, backward skipping, double under crossovers. Yeah, so we've got to be, obviously part of it is our job as a programmers to be exposing you to these movements in your training, but part of it is also down to you to make sure that you are assessing the movements that might be showing up and make sure you are hitting those sessions with intention, or you're doing the extra work to make sure that your skills in these areas are actually improving as well. Okay, so what should I prioritize at this point in the year? Right now, and we are in August. Are we in August right now? Yes, we're in August right now. What should our training look like? I think I would like to see more of a bias towards strength and skills, right? So in terms of doing really, really hard metcons or doing lots of metabolic conditioning, I would say that that's not really a priority right now. We're going to be doing lots of that stuff come kind of December, January time. Right now, the conditioning work should be a little bit lower in intensity, should probably be a little bit longer in duration. Definitely exposing yourself to some short, sharp stuff as well, but it shouldn't be the priority of the program. Also making sure you're continually getting stronger. There are a few athletes within our program that are too strong for the sport of CrossFit. That just really isn't a thing. And just making sure you're working on your skills based on that movement list I just showed you. Now, when December, January comes around, that's when we're going to go into more of like a strength maintenance phase. And we're going to bias and push and increase the amount of conditioning and metcons that we do. So really, you got to think about it. You've now got August to January to try and get as much strength developed as possible, because then once the open run-in starts, your strength is probably not going to increase anymore. It's going to probably maintain, maybe even decrease a bit as we do more conditioning. Then once the season finishes, we start getting strong again. Other things to think about: prioritize health. Guys, at this time of the year, this far away from the CrossFit Open, also understanding that, none of us are paid for this. None of us are full-time athletes. This is something we just love doing. And, is something that we probably think about all the time, but, it's not our livelihood as well. So let's make sure we are prioritizing health. Like, we shouldn't be injured right now. We shouldn't be constantly dealing with small niggles and injuries. If you are, you need to really do some self-assessments. Is it the training? Are you pushing a bit too hard? Is it the recovery part? Are you not doing enough post-training or around training? Is it lifestyle? Is it stress? Is it work? Make sure you guys are dialing in all those factors to make sure that your body should feel pretty good at this time of year. Because if you come into December, January, and you're feeling beat up and injured, that's just going to be a miserable time for you, because training intensity is going to increase and your body's not going to be able to handle it. So try as much as we can to be injury-free. Take the pressure off. This is a great time of year to be spending our time doing other hobbies, other sports, other activities, occupying your weekends doing things maybe outside of CrossFit. I do find that athletes who have the ability to fill up their year with different interests, different hobbies, and different priorities, and kind of flip-flop between these things throughout the year, tend to be the people who are able to do this for a much, much longer time without burning out, without dealing with chronic overuse injuries. So this is a great time of year to do that kind of stuff. And just make sure that when December, January rolls around, that's when you want to have, as I said, that extra gear to give to your training. Okay, so a question I get asked all the time is, Ed, I'm following a group program now, or I'm part of the process programming. How do I work on my weaknesses? If I still have weaknesses and I feel like the program isn't giving me enough to actually work on the things that I really need, what can I do? Well, we have a few things that process, and if you're following a different program, I'm not sure if anyone on this call is. I think everyone's part of the process, which is super cool. We have our accessory program. So, these are programs that are written for you, and you got a choice of Olympic lifting, strength and hypertrophy, which is what we call general accessory. You got endurance, and you got gymnastics. So, strength and hypertrophy training that's written as accessory work every single day. And then you got the choice of Olympic lifting, endurance, or gymnastics twice a week. We typically we add those on Mondays and Fridays, but you can kind of put them anywhere into your week. Another thing I'll just add on top of that is if you really have something that's holding you back, let's say Olympic lifting technique in the snatch is something that's holding you back, or skills in gymnastics like butterfly pull-ups, which we're working on right now. If those things are your biggest priorities right now, you can even add your accessory work to the start of your session. So if you're an online subscriber and you've got, your own gym session to run through, you can actually start your session with accessory work, when you're fresh, a little bit more focused. Or if you're an affiliate, you can get in before class, book into the open gym, spend 10, 15 minutes doing your accessory work, then getting into your main class. Cool. It's just something for you guys to think about. Of course, if all of this is super overwhelming and you feel like you need someone to help you or guide you through the process, remember we do have the premium subscription where you guys will have a coach assigned to you to hopefully help you navigate all these kind of things, as well as give you things like feedback on your videos and your workouts. And for those of you, and I have been guilty of this many times in the past, who love just isolating skills and movements, remember that it's really important that we can't isolate things forever. We could get really good at chest to bar pull-ups in isolation. We could get really good at thrusters in isolation. But when you stick chest to bars and thrusters together and you do 21, 59 reps, that is a very, very different story. There are unique adaptations that have to happen by doing those kind of workouts. So, understand that in our program right now, you are definitely going to see some isolated stuff, but you're also going to see those isolation movements every now and then thrown in with some other things. So for example, on Wednesday for the, what do we have? Wednesday for the perform compete program, we mix in our strict handstand push-ups, which we've been isolating a lot, into strict toes to bar and into double unders. Like we need to do both. We can't just isolate things forever. Okay. Let's quickly talk about what the next cycle looks like. I'm going to brush over this because, we got much more information coming to you guys on Monday when we start. But for the LIB program, remember you guys are doing one session a day, 60, 90 minutes per session. The reason I say 60 to 90 is if you are adding accessory work to program and you got 5 sessions a week. Our priorities, spelt poorly. Well, that doesn't look nice with the capitals and lowercase. We're going to be doing heavy Olympic lifting this cycle. So we're going to be building to some 1RMs at the end. Upper and lower body absolute strength. So that means we're trying to, when we talk about absolute strength, we're kind of like flirting with like the 1 to 5 rep range and trying to move heavy loads. Gymnastics capacity is something we're going to be working on. And we're going to be mixing in some kind of shorter sprint style metcons because we haven't done a whole bunch of those when we look at the whole year. So testing. We have a 12-week cycle coming up, but we're actually going to break that 12-week cycle into 2 6-week cycles. Okay, so over the 12 weeks, some things are going to stay really consistent. And those things are clean and jerk, snatch, front squatting, and we're going to test a row 1 km. So 1 km row at some point. And then when we say 6 weeks here, there's going to be 2 other tests for our LIB program. We are going to continue to test your strict pull-up 1 rep max because we want to see improvements in that in the long term. And we're going to do some form of test for kipping pull-ups or toes to bar or hanging leg raises. So we want to collect some metrics on like how many reps our athletes can do. Cool. So the 6-week test, we're going to start in the first 6 weeks. At some point, we're going to test a strict 1 rep max. In the second 6 weeks, at some point, we're going to test some form of kipping pull-up or toes to bar, AMRAP, and broken sets. And these things will be tested at some point, probably between the 9 to 12 week mark. Now, when we go to the perform program, what does the next cycle look like? Again, same things. And the tests are going to be very similar in terms of strength. Clean and jerk 1 rep max, snatch 1 RM, a front squat 1 RM, not a 3 RM. And we're also going to do a 1K row test. But your gymnastics movement is going to change a bit. We're going to do, this is a staple test that we've done every year for the last 3 years in the process programming, which is a 5-minute AMRAP bar muscle up test. So basically we have 5 minutes to complete as many reps as we possibly can. And then we're also going to do a 75 chest to bar pull-ups for time. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to complete 75. We do have a time cap on that, but that is also a staple test that we've had on the program last year, and we want to see if our athletes are improving on that this year. Okay, that concludes kind of what the general testing cycle, testing block is going to, training block is going to look like. We're going to be implementing an A and a B template once again. So what that means is that every other week, the training will change a little bit, but week 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, so on and so forth will be very similar format, and weeks 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, etc. will be very similar. What this allows us to do, it allows us to still have structure and consistency in our training, but allows us to just address a little bit more in terms of our priorities. We're almost getting there, guys. Okay, this is a super important slide that I want to talk about, because I do know, and I've experienced this myself, when I joined other programs or when I had a coach, is that, when I joined a program, I just wanted to follow the program exactly as it was written. Part of that was like, there was this guilt part to me where it's like, if I skip a session, I feel bad, I'm paying for this, I've got a coach watching over me. And the second part was that, well, if it's been programmed this way, this is the way that I should do it. But what I want to say is that we fully encourage you guys to make adjustments to the training program all the time. And I want to just share a few ways that I recommend we think about trying to add and make changes to your program. What I will say is that if you train an affiliate, this is a little bit harder to do because, of course, you're following a class schedule, so you can't really change around your training days. But, you always do have the option of coming into things like open gyms and doing catch-up sessions. But let me just explain the concepts firstly. The first thing is, every day you come and train, we need to set some intentions. So, you look at the workout of the day, you come into the gym. What is the one thing that you want to put your energy into today? Or maybe it's the two things. Maybe on the program, you have A work, B work, C work. You've got some weightlifting, you got some strength work, and then let's say you got a Metcon at the end. Now, based on how you're feeling and based on what you feel you need or you want to do, what I would advise is picking maybe 1 to 2 of those things and putting more focus and more energy into those things, because we know that sometimes it's hard to put 100% focus into everything. So that's something I really want to encourage you guys to do, is like, what do you really need right now? What does your body feel like doing right now? And then picking those 1 to 2 things on the program and really putting time, energy, and focus into those things. The next thing is the concept of treating your training as a jigsaw puzzle. I do this all the time. I follow the Compete program when I'm not injured. And what I'm doing is I am listening to my body and what it feels like doing. And I'm just kind of moving around different parts of the training week to fit how I'm feeling. So what I might do, maybe it's a Monday and there's clean and jerks, and maybe there's handstand push-ups. And I feel really good. I want to hit my clean and jerk. Maybe my shoulder's just feeling a bit iffy and I don't want to do handstand push-ups. But maybe my bench press is feeling good. Like maybe the horizontal press movement is feeling good. What I might do, I might take the bench press on the Friday and slide it into my Monday session. And I'll kind of move my handstand push-ups away from Monday and I'll slide into Friday. So that's something I do quite a lot. And that's something I kind of do kind of on the go. It's not something I really plan a week in advance or ahead. It's just kind of come into the gym. What do I feel like doing? What does my body feel like? Okay, I don't feel like doing that. Rather than forcing it today, can I move this to another day where I might feel better? And can I slide something else into this piece today so I still get a good training session? And what I will say, we have an affiliate, Coastal, who's running the program. We fully encourage people to do that all the time. So, if you need to make adjustments to a program, you want to do something from another day and slide and swap it in here, you definitely can do that. Of course, you can add accessory or fixed length programs. Kind of talked about that already. That's definitely something we encourage you to do if you have the time and energy. If you don't have the time, you don't have the energy to add accessory programs in, don't worry. The program should be covering all of our bases, that we shouldn't have to do the accessory work. So don't panic if you can't. Taking rest days or combining sessions together. This is something we do or recommend doing quite a lot. If you're feeling like today's just not a day that I feel like pushing, or maybe you don't have much time, maybe some of you are limited by your work or the time you actually get in the gym. Maybe you only got 45 minutes and you don't have enough time to fit in, a whole aerobic Tuesday session. What you might do is just skip a rest day, and maybe on a day where you have more time and more energy, you stick kind of elements of 2 sessions together and do that then. Another thing I would say is, maybe you have certain days in the week where you feel great. Maybe you have certain days in the week where you feel terrible. Maybe Mondays are just a super busy day for you. You got loads of meetings. It's the start of the week with work, but maybe Fridays are a quieter day for you. In that case, what I would say, if you can, stick all the harder stuff that requires more energy and more focus in your Friday session, and do the easier stuff on the Monday that you can just kind of like brainlessly just do and get through. And of course, we do have that premium program where you can have a coach guide you through the whole process. So kind of like, this is one of our last slides now, but I do think this is super important. And again, I know it's a lot harder to do when you're in an affiliate, but the whole concept of self-regulation really encompasses all these different points. But what we're saying is that, we're not going to punish you guys or be angry or tell you off for kind of moving and changing the program around. We've actually fully encouraged you guys to do that, because it's just going to allow you to get more out of the training. Okay, so environment, this is a question that we get asked a lot about. How important is training environment? Training environment refers to, where you're doing your training and who you're doing it with. Personally, I think it's really important, and I think it's very powerful training with other people. So whether that's doing it in a group class, or it's like pulling your friends and family members in to join you, or, you're teaming up with other process program people to get after the workouts. Like, I think it's a really, really good thing, and I encourage you guys to do it. So what that might mean sometimes is, actually, let's say you're in a gym and you've got 4 of you there, and 3 people are doing something similar-ish to your program, but they're doing something different. They're training together. What I would say, I'd encourage you to maybe slightly go off your program on that day, on what's written for you, and use this unique opportunity to train with other people. It's fun, and you're probably going to get a little push out of it. I also think you should think about when you should be doing it. So I know for me, if I'm doing conditioning work and I'm doing it by myself, I'm probably going to take it pretty easy. However, if I'm doing conditioning work and I'm doing it with other people, that's going to give me the extra motivation to push. So, especially as I get closer to things like the CrossFit Open, I really try to make sure that when I'm doing conditioning work, I'm doing it with other people, with my other coaches or my friends or people in the community, because that's going to allow me to get a lot more out of the training session. I know if I do it myself, it's just not going to be the same. And it's the same if I have to do heavy Olympic lifting. I always do better when I'm doing other people. If it's things like chest to bar pull-ups or muscle ups, maybe that's something that I feel comfortable doing that by myself, and therefore, I don't need to be with others. So, I just think, encouraging you guys again, if you have that opportunity to train other people, or if you train by yourself a lot of time, but you do have these unique opportunities, don't feel bad for going on the program. If you can try to get the program to be something similar-ish to what you're doing, or as I said, treat the program as a jigsaw and just move things around, I'd say you should do it. And if you guys, are currently following the program, and you're doing it by yourself as a small group, you can always go and visit one of our affiliates. These are our affiliates around Philippines, Indonesia, Macau, and Hong Kong. And these guys encourage you to come and join them for a workout, even if it's just jumping in for one workout a week, maybe something like a Saturday tester, or jumping in aerobic Tuesdays, or jumping the Monday session. Like, we strongly encourage that you guys do that. And of course, if anyone wants to come to Coastal, which is our gym in Hong Kong, we would absolutely love to have you, join in our classes, or, join in any of the open gym slots. There's always people doing the program. And, of course, we've got an awesome coaching team here of people who can help you along the way as well. Okay. And that's a wrap, guys. I did say it's maybe about 45 minutes, and that is the 45-minute mark. So I wanted to just kind of open this up to anyone if they have any questions. It's also really cool to see we have the most people we've ever had in this course. So this is sick. So in fact, before I open up to questions, before people start leaving, I can see G2's got his backpack on, he's rushing out the office. I would love everyone to just turn on their cameras, and I'd like to get a big smile team photo with everyone. We've got a few stragglers. Let's go, Paul. Mav, you don't need to smile yet, mate. I'm going to give you a countdown. Don't worry. Got a few more people coming in. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for joining. Does anyone have any questions? Always means that it's a bloody great car. Oh, someone's asking a question. Who is it? Who unmuted
Actually,
themselves?
I do have a question.
Yes, you two.
My question relates to a lot of people on the program who are now doing this IROX competitions. Is it advisable to sort of like just swap the Tuesday workouts for the IROX specific training?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I would say, it would make the most amount of sense to be swapping aerobic Tuesdays and maybe a Saturday tester if you're doing 2 high rock sessions a week. Those would probably be the 2 sessions that I would swap out of LPC and transition in high rocks. Again, it also depends on how seriously what you're trying to take high rocks. If the goal is really to be at your absolute best for a high rocks race, then maybe just doing 2 sessions a week or 1 session a week isn't enough. Or if the goal is, that you actually want to peak for the open, that's your main priority, but you'd love to just supplement and have some fun with high rocks along the way, then I would say, subbing in a Tuesday or Saturday session would be definitely more than adequate and shouldn't really, hopefully, take away from your LPC training. What I just would say is that, high rocks being a very lower body dominant training modality, you may want to just think about adjusting your live and perform program with things like squatting, deadlifting, like more lower body based sessions, and maybe making sure you're doing that before you do your high rock sessions. If you're doing your heavy lower body stuff after a high rock session, it's just going to be very dampened. You're not going to get as much out of it. So again, that whole jigsaw analogy, just make sure you're kind of shuffling your week around your high rock sessions so it allows you to get the most out of your live and perform sessions as well. Does that make sense, you two? Awesome. Good question. And good luck in high rocks. Cool. Has anyone else got any other questions, guys? Awesome. Well, listen, if you do have questions, maybe you're just a bit shy, you don't want to ask it on here, or you don't have a question right now and it pops into your head the moment I hang up this call, you can always reach out to me, send me a message, write it on the water cooler, send us an Instagram, or any of the other coaches. We'd be happy to help you. I hope you guys got some value out of that call. I am going to record, save this and put it onto YouTube. So if you are really, really sad and you want to watch this back, then you can absolutely be my guest and do that. Otherwise, I would love it if you could share it with the rest of the community, or if you have friends who are interested in what you do and maybe thinking about joining, then you can always just send them this video and let me do the talking. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining on a Thursday night, guys. Might see some of you again tomorrow. Have yourselves a lovely evening or day wherever you are, and I will catch you guys soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, you too. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.